I think this is going to be a good one. I'm excited about this one. I'm not going to lie to you. I am excited. I'm excited largely because I know what we're going to do today. And I know a lot of research has gone into the discussion today to bring you guys up to speed on the dark web. And I know that I've got a gentleman on the line today that I'm going to introduce here in a moment. It's actually going to give us a little bit of a tour of the dark web. I have done a lot of research on this, as I stated a moment ago. And in so doing, I have watched a handful of videos along with a lot of reading. And what's interesting is I have not actually seen the dark web myself prior to looking at it based on us getting it set up here internally. So based on what I believe you guys will see today, or I know you're going to see today, I think you'll be surprised as to what you're going to see. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around the dark web in general, hence the term shedding some light on this. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. But again, as I said, I think this is going to be a good one. So in getting things kicked off today, first and foremost, I have Dustin Liefers on the line. That's the individual I was referencing a moment ago. Dustin is a longtime veteran here at ThrottleNet. He has been with us over a decade at this point in time and has experience going back probably 20 years or more in terms of information technology, cybersecurity, and a variety of other things as they relate to technology overall. In addition, Dustin is a certified ethical hacker and our cybersecurity manager here. And Dustin is actually going to be the one giving us a little tour later on today of the dark web and showing us some of the most unique, cool, and somewhat terrifying things that you can actually find out there. In addition, there's myself. My name is Chris Montgomery. For those that are not familiar with me or have not seen me in the past, I am the director of sales here at ThrottleNet. I too have been with the organization for roughly a decade. And for all intents and purposes, I am the talking head. So that said, that is what I do here, is really just communicate, and I defer to my team and team of professionals here to ultimately provide the support, the services, the solutions, and the insight that makes us the company that we are today. Getting started, what are we going to cover today? Well, we're going to cover a variety of things. First of all, we're going to cover how many webs there are in the first place. I know, right? We thought there was one. It turns out there's more. How did the dark web start? Why does it exist? How do we even get there? What can you buy there? What tools present the biggest risk to business owners and enterprise organizations? We're going to give you a brief tour. Again, this is probably my most favorite part of this entire webinar today. We're going to talk about what you can do to keep your information safe and what you can do if you suspect or know that your information is out there on the dark web. But before we get started, got a little shameless plug here. We are offering cybersecurity training and best practices, either on-site, virtual, or a hybrid approach, and we'll even do lunch on us for these for organizations of 10 users or more. If you have an interest in having us come out or do a virtual presentation on best practices for your organization, please visit us at throttlenet.com and just go to our Contact Us form, fill out one of those forms, submit it back into us, and one of our team members will get back in touch with you to make arrangements from there. So now that we've done that, let's get into what are the different kinds of webs. And yes, there are more than one. So, and based on my research, there are different terminologies used when you talk in terms of the surface web. Some people call it clear net, I believe is one of the terms that I had heard, deep net, dark net, and so on as we kind of walk through these. But we're going to use the terminology of surface web, okay? Just because it aligns well when we get to the dark web. Now, what is the surface web? First thing I'm going to tell you is the surface web, oddly enough, is not even 10% of the full internet, okay? It is a very, very, very small percentage, but it is the percentage that you can access using the browsers that you guys are familiar with. This is going to be these are going to be browsers like Google Chrome, Yahoo, Edge, Internet Explorer, whatever your flavor of choice might be. But at the end of the day, the surface web are sites that are indexed, that you can go in, as you're familiar with doing, and just type in a search of some kind, and it will offer up hundreds and hundreds of pages of search results related to that specific search. But again, these are things that are indexed and are if you will, public facing. Now, we get into the deep web. This is kind of that middle layer, okay? Now, the deep web, as opposed to the surface web, is really, believe it or not, what comprises 96 to 99% of the internet. Now, the deep web are those areas, if you will, that are behind what they call paywalls, like for subscription services, say Netflix, Hulu, or otherwise. In addition to this, these are like your patient portals for you to get to your healthcare information or your financial services information or anything where you have to log in to actually access it. So as an example, I could not, or you could not, just go out and type in Chris Montgomery's social security number and expect that that's going to come up in a Google search. Hopefully it wouldn't come up in a Google search. The reason for that is because all of that information is housed in the deep web, and it's not in a location that is really searchable, okay? So again, anything you have to sign into typically is a good indicator that you have now gone from the surface web, which is a searchable portion of the internet, to the deep web, which is a non-indexed and not able to be searched variation of the internet. So again, it's there for a reason, but again, it also comprises 96 to 99% of the internet. Then we get to the dark web, okay? Now, believe it or not, the dark web and the deep web are essentially kind of one and the same to a degree, all right? But at the end of the day, and I saw these iceberg analogies online, we stayed true to that. This really is a good representation of what you're talking in terms of with the three different webs that exist out there, is that the vast majority of what you see is a very small portion or percentage of what is actually out there and available. You just have to know how to get to it. But the dark web essentially are sites that are not indexed in a way that Chrome or Yahoo or otherwise could actually find them. Probably the best way to describe this and some analogies that I've seen out there is that the surface web is basically a nice worn path out in the woods, okay? You know where you're going, you know how to get there, you know where the beginning and the end is and all that good stuff. Conversely, when you get into the dark web, this is if you went off of that beaten path and say there was some buried treasure out in the woods somewhere and you know how to get there, but there's no trail that gets you there. That's essentially what the dark web is. It's not a defined trail that leads you anywhere. You have to know where you're going and what you're looking for in a lot of cases to actually get there. If you don't, you're just kind of running around blindly trying to identify and find things. So how did the dark web start? The dark web actually started back in the 90s. Al Gore invented it. No, I'm kidding. He was part of obviously some legislation that occurred back in the 90s that result in the internet as we know it today. I think there's always that discussion around whether or not Al Gore actually invented the internet and how it's phrased. But at the end of the day, it was really the Department of Defense that developed the dark web. And the reason they developed it is to create an environment for anonymity, all right, specifically for our US spy agencies. So again, the idea here was create this large environment, in this case via the dark web, that allows spy agencies or individuals, also allows maybe state actors that need to work incognito or in an anonymous way to be able to communicate. Okay, so again, the dark web essentially was created for that purpose. And I'm going to talk to you here shortly about who funds the dark web, because I think a lot of you folks are more importantly how you get to the dark web through a specific type of router or browser. I think it'll be surprising to most as to how that is funded to this day. So how big is the dark web? Well, I saw varying degrees because again, it is the dark web at the end of the day, and it is hard to get a final number on anything. But based on what I had seen across multiple sites and aggregating the data that I assembled our webinar with today, there's about 55,000 domains that are out there on the dark web. Only about 15% of those, give or take, are actually active. So about 8,400 are actually active at this time. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, but like anything else, I mean, it depends on what is on those sites and what the content and the information is as to how much of a concern that is. And as I said, when we get into that, I feel that a lot of you folks will feel 8,400 is more than enough. So why do they exist in the first place? Well, the deep web exists for obvious reasons, to keep your information private and not available in a way that somebody could just go out on Google Chrome and start typing in your information and get your date of birth, your social security numbers, all your financial data, credit card information, all that good stuff. So the deep web is actually a good thing. It ensures that your information, be it account information, personally identifiable information, otherwise known as PII, PHI, personal healthcare information, and otherwise, all of those things stay in a secure environment that just the random person can't go out and do a search for you and be able to glean all of that information. Now, the dark web exists because honestly, it is still used to this day by those very same agencies that created it in the first place. All right. There is a lot to be said for anonymity, not just in the spy agencies, but also when you talk in terms of countries that just do not allow or have a constitution that's written that allows free speech, like the United States does. So that said, they have to look at alternative resources like the dark web to be able to get their message out there. So if you're in a country that's run by an authoritarian regime, like North Korea, for example, China would be another one as a communist nation. In those countries, you're going to be taking some pretty big chances and going out onto the dark web because ultimately you are bypassing the tools and mechanisms they have in place to ensure that the messaging and the propaganda they are pushing out is not compromised. So again, there is an argument to be made that the dark web is a good thing, but it is really largely dependent upon how it is being used. But to be clear, just like there are nefarious activities that occur on the dark web, there are nefarious activities that occur on the surface web as well. So just be mindful of that as we talk in more detail about the dark web and whether or not it's as bad as some might say, okay? So how do you access the dark web? Well, there's only one way. If you went out through Google Chrome, Yahoo, whatever it is, again, to reference all the different variations of browsers that exist out there, you're not going to be able to search the dark web. The only way that you can do that is using what's called a Tor browser, otherwise known as the onion router, okay? Now, how does Tor work, okay? Tor works, it's pretty slick overall. So basically, what Tor does is that you log into it. Once you're into it, or basically using it, you install it, and once you're into it, you start using it from there. It goes to a node. So basically, there's these available nodes that are out there that it will route to. It will then go to a relay. It will go to what they call an exit node, and then it will come out on the other end on the destination side. Now, what happens through this process is essentially removing certain elements that allow you or an individual on Tor or on the dark web to be identified. It ultimately is what allows the anonymity to maintain intact and to go without compromise. Essentially, it's routing through a variety of different relays and nodes, and on the end, basically, you are fully anonymous. Nobody knows who you are, where you are. All of those different things are essentially turned off or stripped out to a point that governments and otherwise cannot identify who you are, where you're located, or otherwise. Now, what are Tor's sources of income? Now, I want to be very specific on this, so forgive me for reading a little bit here, but I'm going to, because again, I want everybody to fully understand who funds Tor that ultimately allows people to get to the dark web in the first place. One group that funds it is the National Science Foundation. The National Science Foundation is doing it to do fundamental research on privacy and censorship, including studying how Tor's performance and safety works in inventing new censorship technique, or I should say ways to circumvent censorship and the techniques associated with that. Research and development funding comes from organizations like Radio Free Asia and DARPA to actually help build safer tools so that, you know, the dark web again exists in some cases to help organizations be better at general security. So different funders might have different audiences in mind when they're out there building these tools, but ultimately to make the browser safer and easier to use overall. You also have deployment and teaching funding from organizations like the US State Department. Okay, so again, there is still some government involvement here, and US spy agencies still use the dark web and Tor as a form of communications on the dark web. So again, the US State Department, Sweden's Foreign Ministry is another one. They do in-country security trainings, user-oriented documentation, and otherwise help activists around the world learn how to be safer on the internet. And then finally, core organizational support is primarily from people like you and I, okay? Donations to ultimately keep this up and operational and running. And then there are organizations that will meet those donations at 100% match, and that's what ultimately runs the day-to-day operations of Tor in general. So I think for a lot of folks, they think, again, that this is something that's created out there in some criminal enterprise, when at the end of the day, It was actually created by the US government as a method of communications and continues in part to be funded by the US government for research and educational purposes. So again, surprising to most. Is it illegal? Nope, not illegal at all. Now, what you buy on there is probably going to be illegal, but to go out there and look, to download the Tor browser, to go out and search online on the dark web, none of that is illegal. It's not illegal in the US, it's not illegal in the UK. It is going to be illegal in, say, China, I can assure you of that, or it's going to be illegal in North Korea. But as far as the US and the UK are concerned, what we are going to do today and what you could do hypothetically is not at all illegal. And although I didn't include a slide on it, but I think everybody gets this misconception or perception that the dark web is actually dark, as in dark mode, I guess, is turned on all the time whenever you go out there on these different websites. The reality of it is when you see it, it's not really a dark web, okay? It's just the namesake, I think, lends to a little bit of that and the way people talk about it, but at the end of the day, the websites themselves are not dark, so to speak. Now, what are these sites called? Well, we're running them through the Onion router, Tor. So what are these domains called? .onions. So as opposed to .coms, .net, .edu, .org, or what have you, when you're online and you're in the dark web using the Tor browser, you are looking for onion domains, okay? So they are not indexed and easy to find. I mean, to a degree they are. You'll see it when Dustin has some of these pulled up. But again, we are looking at .onions when we talk in terms of the different domains that we see out there. Now, what can you find on the dark web? You can find a lot of things I believe most people already assumed you could find, but you can find some other things too, all right? So credit card numbers, any kind of drug you want, and you're gonna see this here in a few minutes. I mean, anything from cocaine to methamphetamine to anabolic steroids, all of the above are available on the dark web if you're willing to take the risk, okay? Guns, we're going to visit that as well. I'm sure no background checks are required in the dark web, and who knows if these guns are even traceable in general. Counterfeit money, talk about that as well. Stolen subscription credentials, for example, a hacked Netflix account, believe it or not, is available to you. We'll talk about that here in a moment. And then software that helps you break into other people, or more importantly, businesses' computers. And again, that's where things get a little off the rails. Now, to reinforce what I'm saying, types of data bought and sold, you'll see here stack rank down. It's a little bit older chart, I understand, but really it hasn't changed much over the years. Credit card information, debit card information, social security numbers, medical records, account numbers, PIN numbers, you name it. The idea, though, as you can see here, really is get enough information to either do identity theft or to start using somebody else's financial tools, if you will. So credit cards, bank accounts, and otherwise, and accessing those accounts. So again, it all really comes back to those two things by and large, which all are driven by one thing, which is financial gain. Nobody's stealing somebody's identity unless it's usually for financial gain, although there are some, I'm sure, that want to maintain a certain level of anonymity. But for the most part, most of this is being done and driving to an ultimate end result of trying to steal money, okay? Now, as we keep going here, what are some of the more interesting things that I found in doing my research? I thought I had the market cornered until I saw what Dustin found. And again, I know I keep prefacing it, but I think, again, you'll be surprised at what we're going to see here today. Login credentials for a $50,000 Bank of America account for $500. $3,000 in counterfeit $20 bills, $600. 7 prepaid gift cards with $2,500 balance on each for a total of $17,500, $500, and they will express ship it to you. This is where you're going to find things are a little crazy with the dark web too, is that it does really run like a normal business. And then lifetime Netflix premium account. So this is that hacked account, $6. $6 for a lifetime membership to Netflix. So when you find all this stuff, how do you buy it? Well, you buy it with Bitcoin. For those that aren't familiar with Bitcoin, which these days I'd be hard pressed to find anybody on the street who's not, but for those that are not, Bitcoin is basically just like the dark web. It is not traceable. It has a heightened level of anonymity. It's confidential. And these days, it continues to gain value day over day, year over year, and so on and so forth if you invest it in the right Bitcoin. Bitcoin is probably a topic for another day because it is a very interesting subject that I think a lot of people have questions around. But at the end of the day, this is how financial transactions occur in the dark web. 100% driven by Bitcoin. Okay, you're not typically sending somebody money in the mail. You're not writing them a check. You're not doing an ACH transaction. If you do not have a Bitcoin account, which does require a process to get set up in the first place, you are not going to be able to conduct transactions on the dark web. Now, what dark web tools and services present the highest enterprise risk? Well, according to Into the Web of Profit, which was a report that identified these 12 categories of services, typically the things you can find out there, and again, we're going to see some of this, infections or attacks, malware would be one of those. Say you're upset with an employer, you could do a distributed denial of service where you overwhelm a server to the point that the server can no longer conduct business. Botnets, you can do things like gain access and take advantage of exploits and purchase lists of those exploits, keyloggers, things along those lines. Services like espionage for targeting specific organizations. So you can actually go out and buy a service to target a business or company to go in and try to compromise that organization. Others would include support services like tutorials, but not in a good way, tutorials on how to do bad things. So for example, how would you hack into this? How would you compromise this? These are the types of tutorials we're talking about. Providing credentials, again, to credit cards, financial data, bank accounts, and otherwise. Different variations of phishing attacks that are available to be purchased on the dark web. Refunds, customer data, operational data, financial data, and then finally intellectual property and trade secrets. And then break these down into 3 different risk variables and categorize them based on whether or not they're intended to devalue an organization, ultimately undermining the brand trust and possibly losing ground to a competitor, disrupting the organization. Again, this is what I mentioned a moment ago with the denial of service attack. So you've got a disgruntled employee, they can go out on the dark web, purchase a denial of service, if you will, from someone and have them just bombard a former employer and just make life difficult for them, or defrauding the entire enterprise altogether. So again, these are the 3 risk variables that they are associating with the 12 different categories that we see out there, and they essentially stack rank them. But at the end of the day, the takeaway here, guys, is that there are a variety of different variables that exist out there, or I should say different tools that are available on the dark web that are ultimately designed to do one of these 3 things. And that's why I think it's most important for people to be a little concerned, obviously, about the dark web. But I think now is probably as good a time as any that I've had this build up to this to hand the floor over to Dustin and really to show you guys a little bit of what the dark web looks like. So Dustin, if you will, go ahead and grab the screen from me and give everybody a taste of what the dark web looks like and what they could expect to find out there.
Yep, give me just a moment here to get my screen shared out to the right place. Can you see my virtual machine?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, thank you. So thanks for having me, Chris. I'm looking forward to showing everybody just a quick glimpse of kind of some of the stuff that goes on the dark web. So first of all, this is for, educational purposes only. Don't recommend to do this at home, anything like that. I'm using a virtual machine that's segmented from my own network, and I'm also routing all my traffic through a VPN that's going through Toronto, Canada currently. So just a little bit extra protection there. So again, I wouldn't recommend doing stuff like this at home. So let's talk a little bit about Tor real quick. So in general, torproject.org, you can see they have various different operating systems. It's a simple installer. You download and install it just like any other browser. Here's the icon for Tor. Like Chris mentioned, Tor routes all your traffic through various nodes. Anyone can actually host a node. Like I could spin up a server and host a Tor node if I wanted to. So you never really know where your traffic's going through. And that's a little bit of an issue. But in general, all your traffic gets encrypted multiple times, usually 4 or 5 times. And each hop along the way, it peels off one layer of that encryption, which is kind of where the onion routing comes from. So they never know exactly where you're going, just where you're coming from in the next hop. So there's many different steps along the way. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up the browser in general, and you'll see I've got a bunch of tabs already open that we're gonna go through. So the first thing I wanted to point out is you can go to normal websites just like you would from Google Chrome or Edge. Here I'm on ESPN.com. I don't know, you guys saw Bryce Harper got hit in the mouth. He's all good now against Cardinals last night, but just wanted to point that out. But there is a search engine, or there's several search engines. This one's called Grams. Probably a take on drugs, I would assume. And then also you can see it looks just like Google, uses the same colors and whatnot. So that's kind of interesting. And then from there, we're gonna go through a few low-level hacking type things. So this is one site, the hacker community, and they offer up their services. This one looks to be fairly low end. They don't have any prices or anything. They hack website servers, computers, smartphones, etc. I thought the funny thing here was be careful your kids out there on the dark web. They're taking money to change your grades at school and at college and stuff as well. So just to get a piece of that, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because I do have a lot to cover, but I want to just give you an idea of what's out here. This is a hacking forum here where they, different hackers are offering up different tools. You can see here's a fatality hacking set, master hack pack, there's some beginner's guides. So this might be where some young starting out hackers are starting to get information and whatnot. This is where we start to get into a little bit of data leakage and whatnot. I want to talk about this for a minute. So this is, again, just a forum out on the dark web. You can see it's a .onion address like Chris had mentioned before. And so you can see like this 1xbet.com. They're saying that they have 75,000 leaked email addresses and passwords. So just to point out why that's bad and just practice some good hygiene. If you're using the same credentials across multiple websites, and especially if you're also mixing passwords between your personal stuff and your work stuff, what happens is you might have had an account out here at 1xbet, that site gets hacked, that password's now in this database that anyone can come out here and grab. So if they see your email address with a password, they can start trying that combination against multiple things and getting access to various things. That's why it's always a good idea to use a password manager and make sure you're using unique passwords and changing them regularly. So we're going to start getting into a little bit of the more interesting stuff now. So if you're familiar with Silk Road, that's kind of one of the big marketplaces. It does still exist. It's been back and forth quite a bit. I did find it. It requires a log on. This is kind of a knockoff version of Silk Road, if you will, Agora Road, I guess. But they are offering up selling some hacking services. Chris had mentioned DDoS attacks earlier. Say the pizza place down the road messed up your pizza and you're upset with them. You can spend $99 and you can knock their website offline for 4 hours, on a Saturday night to get your revenge. Obviously, that's illegal and you can end up in jail for that. But just to give you an example, basically they use a botnet of hacked machines out there to flood that site and overwhelm it and take it offline. The only other thing, there's a lot of things here, but I want to point out the custom ransomware. So what we're seeing is a lot of lower level hacking groups getting involved in ransomware as well. And they may not have the programming knowledge and whatnot to design their own ransomware, but they can outsource that part of it. And then they can try and take over networks that they may have access to and whatnot. And kind of, even without all the knowledge to do that themselves, they can outsource that out a bit. So now we're going to move on to real and fake documents. So this is pretty interesting. They have a price list here. You can see they only produce high quality passwords or passports and IDs. I thought it was pretty interesting to see you can get a USA driver's license for $400. There's a passport on here, and obviously any host of other countries. Some of the interesting stuff on this side is it seems like a lot of times they use real documents and they find someone close to your same age and obviously your same gender and whatnot, and they'll provide you with the backstory, so your parents' real name, and they just transplant your photo onto the document. And then others they talk about they actually create new documents from the beginning, and they say that for some countries they can actually register those documents in the government database, which means they either have people on the inside or they have access to that as well. So if you're looking to get a fake ID in a new country, good place to go. Next, we got guns. Chris had mentioned guns a bit earlier. So yeah, clearly there's no background checks. As an example, if you're a felon and you can't buy a gun, you could come out here and get one. I assume, I didn't go looking, but I assume you can also get them defaced with no serial numbers and things like that. There's obviously no registration involved here either. You just kind of buy it with Bitcoin and send it to a secure location where typically that has to go through a whole process. Fake money. I think Chris had mentioned fake money as well. I found various sites. This is one that just talks about, this one doesn't actually have any prices. It's kind of like contact them, but they say that their fakes are so good that you can use them in banks even. They've got the holograms and the strips that are in them. I found another one that had access to like money that was marked to be shredded. I guess we destroy a lot of money, obviously, as it gets old and we take it out of circulation. This place was talking about skimming money from the money that was supposed to be shredded. So it was actual real US money that they were selling that you could also access. So there's a lot of crazy stuff happening. Some other steroids, obviously. If you need that extra help at the gym, you can just come out here and try something new. And then we get into, drugs. Obviously, cannabis is on here, even though that's legal at a lot of places now, but all various types of cocaine, methamphetamine, LSD, ecstasy, all of this stuff, done anonymously on the back end. And like he said, paid with Bitcoin, etc. So now I'm going to start getting into some of the stuff that's a bit more what we're focused on and what we're worried about and what we're trying to help prevent is, businesses being taken advantage of and being ransomwared and their data being stolen. In the past, if you would get hit with ransomware, it was, if you had good backups, you were good. You get hit with ransomware, you get crypto notes, for just as long as you have good backups, you can pretty much ignore all of that and restore your data, and get back to normal and move on. Now, these guys have pivoted, and what they're starting to do is they're starting to try and extort these companies. If you don't pay the ransom, they start uploading your data to the internet. And I found, a host, I found at least 10 different sites, and there are a bunch more that I didn't even look at, where these various hacking groups all have sites like this. These are all businesses, Carolina, and they list out the type of data that they have, databases, bank details. I'm just going to kind of scroll through this and we'll pop in and look at a couple of them. So here's a law firm, these places have been hit by these groups and their data stolen, and they put it up here and they send the links to competitors. If they find anything bad, they go out and they, take it to authorities, etc. I know I had looked at a couple that were decent examples. So like this Baker and Taylor, here's all the data that they say. And then if you click in here, it'll take a minute to load. Tor is a bit slower, and that's why I have all this stuff preloaded. Also, it's a bit slower than the normal internet due to all the encryption. But you can see here, they're like, hey, we downloaded a lot of interesting data from your network. All of your data is fresh and will be stored for 6 months. If you need proof, we are ready to provide them. If you don't pay, we'll leak all this data. And then they put screenshots of all the various folders that they got access to. And this company obviously hasn't paid the ransom. They may have recovered from the attack, but their data was stolen as well. This place here, 1.2 terabytes of data, accounting and that's a lot of data, guys. Like that's a lot of data. Word documents and stuff like that doesn't take up that much space. And I like these little descriptions that they type up. They're always fairly interesting. So all data is fresh. You have several days to resolve this, and then again they go through and they list out everything that they have access to, and they give you a certain amount of time to bounce from that. So this is a different hacking group here. And actually this place had a rules site, and I went into that just to kind of give you an idea. They walk you through the whole process. They're pretty nice about it. They walk you through how to make the Bitcoin payment. They want you to only send one Bitcoin payment or one Bitcoin to start with, and then after they verify it, you can send the rest. Then they provide you with a decryptor so you can decrypt your data and get it back, if they've had access. So then they walk you through how to do that. They'll even decrypt 2 files to let you know that it works, to show you that the data is recoverable. And then this is my favorite part down here, where once we receive payment, this is our Rachnar Locker team guarantee. We will delete all the data we had. We'll delete all these posts that we've made, like we've been looking at. We'll delete any back doors that we have, if one still exists, if you haven't already found it. And we'll never attack you again, even if we find new vulnerabilities. There was another one. Oh yeah, and I've seen this happen. We had a business contact us, and we helped them with a ransomware thing, and unfortunately they didn't have backups. And at the end of it, they literally sent over, it was a pretty generic, but like a security best practices to this company. So it's interesting. I want to show you a couple more of these. These are, again, just various sites with data, and there was a couple good examples on here. So here's a police department, and if we go in here, of course, let me see if I can get this right.
Even on the dark web, Dustin,
Yeah,
you gotta have a CAPTCHA.
Correct. And man, I fail these all the time. I think I got it. All right, let me go back to this police department one. I thought this one, this is a police department. I think it was near LA. Yeah, Los Angeles. They put up, I could download these files right now. If I click on that, it's going to give me a download, and then I can unzip that and see what data is there. And then the interesting part that I saw was that this is a dump out of their Active Directory. That's what all this is it's giving you the machine name and whatnot. And it shows the operating system. And what I've found on these that list these, what I'm always seeing is I'm seeing, Windows 7 machines and older servers. Like this place has a lot of Windows 7 machines. I'm going to show you one other here. These guys had some fairly new servers, but I guess the point is you're only as strong as your weakest link. If you're keeping older machines around, you never know that one of those machines may lead to the compromise, right? And then there was one other that I saw that I thought was kind of fitting. This Morgan County, I just happened to click on it, and hey, well, it's Morgan County, Missouri, which I looked up, which is just north of Lake of the Ozarks, I guess. So same with these guys, a bunch of data. And then I was looking through here, and they got Windows 7, they got Windows XP machines. They had some 2003 servers that were down here a bit further. So just as a reminder about things like that. But yeah, these guys, they're vicious. They were getting screwed out of their ransom too much by people starting to have good backups, and now they're stealing your data in the process, and they're putting it out there and trying to extort people. So obviously the best way to avoid that is just preventing it from happening altogether. But that, I've got several of these sites, but that's basically the gist of what I wanted to show. And I hope that kind of opens everybody's eyes a bit to what is happening out there on the dark web. So thanks, Chris.
Yeah, Dustin, thank you very much. I am going to grab the screen back here, if I may. Make sure we're in good shape here. I believe everybody should be able to see my screen again. Dustin, you see it okay?
Yes, I think I see the next slide as well, though.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me stop share and reshare. I apologize. Must have grabbed the wrong one here. Okay, how about now?
Yep, looks good.
Looks good. Okay. So as you guys probably saw, very eye-opening experience whenever you actually get out there on the dark web. I know for myself personally, we started looking at this earlier this week, and as Dustin was able to uncover more, it was shocking what we found. And obviously, I think for anybody who's on our webinar today, to see the type of data and information that can be easily gotten to for free, and ultimately resulting in organizations being compromised, it is a real eye-opener. It's also the reason, shameless plug time, why we are offering a free dark web compromise report to businesses of 10 users or more. This is going to be specific to that domain only, so we're not going to go through and look at individuals. It will capture any individuals that are out there on the dark web, if you will, excuse me, based on the domain name. So for example, throttlenet.com, any email addresses associated with that or otherwise that have been compromised, it is going to pull that information. So if you'd like to get a report like that, we would ask that you go out to throttlenet.com to our contact us form and fill that out, and we'll have a team member reach out to you to schedule a time, make arrangements to get that together for you, as well as to send it over to you and review the results. What you're going to find coming back to you is just a general best practices around how these credentials are typically compromised, and just giving you some proof sourcing and facts around what ultimately happens with this, and how 39% obviously of adults are using the same or are the exact same or a slight variation of passwords across all or multiple sites. Then it tells exactly how many exposed credentials we've seen for your company, as well as just giving you some insight. Look, do you have any external threat intelligence going on, or any data breach or privacy law compliance? And finally, the report in its final stage is going to look something like this. So essentially what it'll be is what was found, the email address that was found, the password that was found, the source, origin, and the PII hit, which is personally identifiable information hit. So again, it's going to be pretty good. And if nothing else, it's going to give you guys some insight that, holy cow, we have some of our information out there. They've got our passwords and credentials, and get you guys kind of thinking in terms of really how you need to be thinking, which is, as we continue to go on, is being more security minded in your day-to-day activities and ensuring that you don't get compromised and you don't find your information being out there on the dark web. So again, if you would like us to do a free dark web scan for you and you have an organization of 10 users or more, reach out to us via the throttlenet.com contact us form, and we'll have a team member reach out to begin that process. Moving on, believe it or not, guys, and you may have seen a little bit on Dustin's demo there. So again, Dustin, thank you so much for walking us through that and taking the time to get that whole thing together for us and having those pages ready to rock and roll. But there is some honor among thieves, okay? It seems kind of surprising to me, but as most know, I mean, whether you're organized crime or otherwise, there does seem to be some honor amongst those groups. And as such, they actually have a ratings and review system in here. Even though the dark web has a lot of nefarious activity and criminal activity taking place on it, apparently they still want to make sure that these criminals are going to do what they say they're going to do, and they're going to fulfill the promises that they make based on the Bitcoin remittance and whatever it is you are purchasing from them. So again, it is very surprising to see that they actually have a feedback as well as a Yelp style review in place to ensure that you're doing business with good people, whatever that means. Okay, so what can you do to protect yourself? We've covered a lot of ground so far, right? We've talked about how the dark web came to be, how you get to the dark web. We've done a tour of the dark web. We've actually seen businesses that have been compromised and the type of data that is out there and available for anybody for free to download until such time as they comply with whatever the requests and requirements are of the attackers themselves. So to protect yourself, the first thing you have to do is really just think for a few minutes around, well, what do I need to protect in general? So what data do I need to secure most? Obviously, it's going to be anything that is of financial nature, as well as anything that is personally identifiable information. That's going to be social security numbers, date of birth, full names, that kind of stuff. So again, ensuring that we know what to secure. Then what devices is this information stored on? All right, so identifying all of that and getting our hands wrapped around that. What devices can be used to access that data? So how could somebody potentially get into it? Do we have VPN connections set up or just wide open ports? I mean, what exactly are we doing here? How could somebody potentially access the data? And what external mechanisms do we need to put in place to tighten things up? And then finally, do we have it set up in a way with the mindset of least privilege? In this case, what we're talking about is ensuring that users only have access to the data and information they should have access to. You should not have, say, a receptionist that can access the payroll report. But believe it or not, I've been in organizations where everything is wide open. And hypothetically speaking, if the receptionist knew, she would know that she could get to that information if she just knew how to get there. So again, making sure that you are putting in place the proper permissions, I should say, to prevent somebody getting information that they should not be getting to. Of course, Dustin already touched on this. I'll touch on it as well. Implement effective passwords. Make sure these passwords are at least 16 characters or more. Excuse me. In addition, make sure they have a number, a symbol, or use a password solution like LastPass to help you create these passwords and ultimately house these passwords. Make sure that you are changing your passwords on a regular basis. In a business, especially those that are subject to compliance laws or HIPAA laws, they want you to change that password typically once a quarter, if not more often than that. So again, have a policy in place for a password refresh to occur at a scheduled interval based on the compliance requirements or the internal security protocols that you as an organization have established and put in place. Implement multi-factor authentication. This is a very easy way for you to be able to create a secure environment for logging in without adding a lot of additional steps or layers. So again, multi-factor authentication, otherwise known as MFA. And I hope it goes without saying, but I have been in plenty of organizations where this is the case. Make sure that everybody has a unique username and password. For example, if you're in a healthcare facility and you have exam rooms and each room has a workstation in it, all right, make sure that each user or healthcare provider in there has a unique name and password. Why? Because if HIPAA comes in and something is compromised and they want to do an audit, they don't have the ability to do an audit because everybody's logging in with the same username and password combination. So we cannot see or help to really deduce down where did this compromise take place and who hypothetically is the one that actually committed the act. So again, make sure that all users have a unique username and password, even if they're sharing the same machine, because at the end of the day, they're all coming in to the same network. So again, be sure that you do that. Implement an enterprise-grade firewall. Okay, this is essentially the moat around the entire domain or your network. If you do not have an enterprise-grade firewall in place, or if you do have a firewall in place, but it was not configured properly, and it has open ports on it, somebody could hypothetically from outside compromise that firewall and in turn gain access to your information. So again, make sure that you have an enterprise-grade firewall that is fully encrypted. In an ideal world, has the most current firmware and licensing updates and security suites installed, which means that you need to continue to re-up that licensing year over year over year to ensure that you are fully protected. Leverage a cybersecurity awareness training program. The one that we endorse and have found the most success with is a solution called Know Before. Okay, Know Before essentially does mock phishing attacks that look like real emails coming in and allows users to interact with those in a safe way. But then if they click on something that they shouldn't, at that point, it is going to offer up educational videos on what they should have looked out for and what they can do to protect themselves again in the future. So again, implementing a security awareness program of some kind. And then data encryption. Make sure that your data, while at rest on your servers or workstations, is encrypted. That way, if that information, say that laptop is stolen or lost, that data is encrypted. It's going to take a long time to get through that to ultimately access the data if they could ever do it at all. In addition to that, make sure that data is encrypted while in transit. So again, as you're communicating back and forth with organizations online or otherwise, make sure that you're doing it in a secure way via a secure site, and the data while in transit is encrypted, preventing man-in-the-middle attacks and individuals being able to view that data. So those are best practices around how we can hopefully prevent your information from ending up on the dark web, as what we saw with some of those organizations Dustin had shown us earlier. So we're going to take a break here for just, again, another plug. Just give you guys an introduction to our new WinWin campaign we introduced earlier this year. In this case, what we're offering as part of our WinWin is we're giving the first 30 days of our managed network services voted best in class 5-6 years running now by Small Business Monthly, as well as being one of the most highly rated in reviews on Google right now. So again, we're going to give you the first 30 days of that program for free. We're not going to charge you any onboarding fees. And if you don't like what you see in the first 30 days, we're going to uninstall everything. We're going to pay you $1,000 to say thank you for the opportunity to do business with us, and vice versa. And then finally, after that first 30 days, we are not going to lock you into a term contract. You are going to go month to month after that. We're going to have to work to earn your business every single 30 days. So again, you have no risk associated with working with ThrottleNet. And again, it's one of the reasons why I feel that we have been so successful in the St. Louis marketplace. If you'd like more information on the WinWin campaign and how we can be of assistance and service to you in this regard, by all means, reach out to us at throttlenet.com via one of our many, many contact forms that are out there. All right, picking up where we left off. Can law enforcement do anything about this? They have been trying and trying and trying. And unfortunately, and I can use essentially just the war on drugs as a good example, that started back in the 80s. We've been trying for years to combat drug use. The end result is it just keeps showing up. Okay, the dark web is really no different. At the end of the day, you take down one, there's 3 others that are going to pop up in its place. All right. I'm reading a book right now. Dustin referenced it earlier about the Silk Road, called American Kingpin. For those that are interested, I would encourage you to pick it up. It's very interesting. But what it gets into is the individual who started the Silk Road, which was an illicit and illegal drug website. That said, he got taken down. He's in prison right now. But that doesn't stop what you saw via Dustin's discussion and his demo today of the dark web. There's hundreds of sites out there now that sell all the very same things that the Silk Road was selling, roughly 10 years ago before they got fully taken down. Can you search for your information on the dark web? Well, now, if you want to go through that whole process of spinning up a virtual machine and downloading the Tor router and setting up secure VPN connections and doing everything that Dustin did, even through that entire process, not really. Okay, it's you can go out and do some searches, as you saw on the Grams page, but at the end of the day, it's not very easy to go out and just find yourself, largely due to the fact that things are not indexed in the same way. That said, you can, though, monitor the dark web. So if your information hypothetically has gotten out there, you can monitor it and continue to find and locate that information. But understand, it's not 100% like most things in life. And the reason for that is, let's say it's a scanned PDF document. It can't see that. All it sees is an image of a document, a PDF. It doesn't know what's within the PDF. So for example, when we were doing this and getting ready for this the other day, and went out on some of those compromised sites, we were actually able to view somebody's tax forms. All right. Well, those tax forms are scanned in. Okay. And since they're scanned in, it looks like an image. And as a result, even if they did a monitoring on there, they would not be able to necessarily see that their tax forms were out there and available online. So we go through the monitoring process. We've now implemented a monitoring solution like ones that ThrottleNet provides to organizations and otherwise through our security suites. And we now know that our information is out there. So what next? Well, what next is we know it's out there. So the real best thing that we could do here is to put in place some sort of a solution like LifeLock or Identity Guard, because at the end of the day, we know it's there. So now all we can do is just get in place mechanisms that if information or data is compromised and if somebody starts to try and use it for financial reasons, identity theft or otherwise, that at least we have some sort of a tool that's going to notify us that something is happening and then allow us to take some sort of action to prevent it. So again, you've got the idea of prevention, right? Prevention is first. That's the usernames, passwords, firewalls, encryption, and all that. There's the monitoring to see if, okay, did it get out there anyway? And if it did, let's put in place these types of measures to ensure that it gets no worse, or if it does, that I have some sort of notification prior to something taking place that's ultimately going to mess everything up for me and my ability to get a bank loan or otherwise. So what is next for the dark web? Well, quite honestly, it will just continue to exist in its current state and continue to grow over time. There will always be things like sales and malicious code and how to execute it. There will be services available like ransomware as a service, where you literally pay a hacker to provide you with a ransomware product and go out there and wreak havoc on individuals and organizations. and consulting or subcontracting things out to individuals to have them go out and do those things on your behalf. So again, these things are not going anywhere. The dark web will always be here. It is not going anywhere anytime soon. So the best practice is to work to prevent, work to identify, and work to protect against. If you can do those three things, you're going to be in a much better place than you would have been prior to our discussion today. So as we wrap up here, does anyone have any questions on anything at this point? I will take a look at our Q&A board here, but I believe for most, we've covered everything. I think that everything, no open questions that I can see, at least at this point in time. So as we wrap up here, George, I'm going to hand the floor over to you. George is the president, George Rosenthal of ThrottleNet. He's been on the call. He essentially serves as our producer. You can probably see him on screen now. So George, I'll let you kind of wrap up here and talking about a referral program and any additional thoughts you have.
Sure. And thank you so much for everyone that has attended this webinar, and also those watching us on our YouTube channel and on our website. You'll be able to watch this recording on both our YouTube channel and our website at throttlenet.com/webinars. As you can see on the screen, we love referrals. And of course, if you know someone who needs some help in the IT world, or even just a friend who is a small business owner who just needs to be looked out after, we can definitely help them. We are looking at anyone who has 10 computers or more. Even if they have an IT staff, we can help that staff get through things. So we're looking at $500 to $1,000 for just a simple referral. One of the most important things, though, and I know a lot of you watching out there are not in Missouri, and you won't know what I'm talking about when I say we are the Show Me State. One of the reasons we are the Show Me State is why Dustin showed you everything. The point is, now that you've seen that, what are you going to do about it? So if you know somebody that needs help, if you need help, you need to start asking the questions about, how do I make sure my logo isn't one of the ones we just saw? If you're a business owner, that should be a very eye-opening experience of what you just saw. And if you're getting this at the very end, you need to go back and rewatch Dustin's portion when we start showing logos of actual companies with financial data, client data, accounting systems. It's extremely important. This is not something that in the Show Me State we wait to see until it happens to me, until I do something about it. This is something that has to happen now, and you need to prevent that from happening to make sure your logo doesn't show up on the world. So I can't encourage you enough to go to throttlenet.com, fill out one of the forms. We will be in contact with you immediately. There's so many different ways we can help you. And as Chris talked about before, little to no risk at all to work with ThrottleNet and to get started in protecting your business.
Yeah. And to George's point, as we wrap up here, the ways that we help organizations out there is we are a managed services provider. So we essentially can serve as your full-time IT department, in addition to supplementing existing IT departments if that's the need. We provide business continuity and disaster recovery solutions. For example, somebody's compromised by a ransomware attack that encrypts all of their data and information. We have solutions that we can roll back time, so to speak, without a DeLorean, no less, and result in us pulling back a version before the attack even took place. We offer hosting solutions and secure environments, such as the Azure hosting environment by Microsoft. And then, of course, cybersecurity solutions. We wouldn't even be having this discussion today were it not for cybersecurity and the need for organizations to take it more seriously and better understand what they can do to prevent attacks and ultimately end up in the dark web, as we saw today. So as we wrap up here, how can we help? Give us a call, toll free, 866-829-5557, or check us out online, again, at throttlenet.com. So as I finish here today, again, I thank you so much for joining us today. I'm hoping that everybody gained something out of this. I know that I found it incredibly interesting. I hope that you did as well. And again, keep us in mind now and into the future that if you have needs, questions, concerns, or you are concerned about the security of your organization, your network, that ultimately we can assist and give you some insight and ways that you can resolve those issues. So until next time, we certainly do appreciate your time today, and we look forward to seeing you during our next webinar upcoming here in May. Thank you so much, and I will look forward to talking to you soon.